Okay guys, welcome back to another tutorial with me, Dr. Octobeard. So a little while ago I did this video where I had these power generation units with these bars on top of them that were counting up. And then a little while after I did this video here where I've got an air supply and a health supply that can be taken up by walking into objects, and in the case of the air supply, that slowly counts down over time. So in this tutorial I'm going to show you how I did that. So to keep things short and simple, I'm going to show you just how I did the air and how I got it to count down and then go back up again. So the first thing I did up here was to create on the first person character, which is the camera, to create a canvas using the right click Unity UI canvas. Once I created a canvas, I renamed it Critical Economies Canvas, and then I added a slider. And again, I just did that by right clicking UI, add slider. When you add a slider, a new slider, you get three things. You get a background, you get a fill area, and you get a handle slide area. Now if I just put this onto the game here, there's a lot of other stuff going on, but this section in the middle right here, this is the slider that I've just created. This handle slide area here, you don't really need if you're making a health bar, because all you really need is the bar itself. So the first thing you can do when you create a new slider is you have slider, background, fill area, and fill. And I'm going to show you what I've done on one of the actual economies from the game. Delete that. Let's take a look at the air slider. So if I expand the air slider, you'll see I've got the background here, the fill area, and the fill, same as before. I've just renamed that fill air. And I've got this air text. All I've done is I've gone to the slider, I've right-clicked, and I've gone UI text. And that air text, as you can see here, says air supply in my audio wide font. That's the words down here. And I've just positioned that using these draggers over here on the y-axis of position. Now there are a couple of things you're going to want to do in the hierarchy before you start taking a look at the scripting. So the air slider itself is what has the script on, and we'll get to the script in a second. You can see the variables here, the maximum air level, the rate of decrease, and what the two images are, and this master alarm that we're not going to worry about today. You've then got the background, which you can leave pretty much as it is, the fill area, which you can leave pretty much as it is, and finally the fill section. So what's going to happen here, the fill area is the space that I'm going to fill with this color bar. The fill, and I've renamed it fill air, is what's going to fill it. So you can see I've changed that color here to the color that I want my air supply to be. If you were doing health, for example, you might change it to red up there or something like that. I'm not going to do that, so I'm not going to do that. So because the thing we want the script to affect is the slider, we put the script on the slider. So let's take a look at this script and see what's in it. Control F. So the first thing you'll notice is this Unity Engine UI up at the top. This is because I'm using the user interface. I'm using the canvas with a slider, images and all sorts of things on it. Underneath then I've got a few different variables in here. So I've got a public static float for the current air level. It needs to be static so that other scripts can access it and affect what that number is. A float just means that it's decimal, and there are more things you can do with decimals in scripts than you can with whole numbers, integers. I've then got a public float of the maximum air level and a public float of the rate of decrease of air. And if I quickly go in to take a look at these values in here, so you'll see I've set my maximum air level to 100 and the rate of decrease to 0.5. That means it's going to count down by 0.5 every second. I've then got two variables that relate to the UI system. I've got the slider itself, which I've called air slider, so it knows which slider to affect. And I've got the image, the fill image air, so it knows which image to slowly crawl along the screen when filling up the bar. I've also got this public text master alarm to make a master alarm flash up, but I've taken that out of this text. You won't need that to get the rest of this working. Moving down the script into void awake, you can see at the start of the game I need to get the component of the slider so it knows which slider it's affecting, and that's whichever slider I've dragged into here, the air slider. And as you can see, that's this slider here. I want it to affect the same slider that the script is on. And then finally down here in void update, I have created a new float for the fill value, and that fill value is going to be set to the current air level. You have to create a new float at void update because this air slider.value needs to hit something that's coming in real time, something that's coming as part of void update. So what you do is you create this fill value and then you set it equal to the current air level. So the current air level is going to be whatever it just was minus whatever I've set it to count down by. And that's times time.delta time. So times time.delta time means that that value there will basically be in seconds. And so every second, it's going to count down by 0.5. 200 seconds, it would count down from 200 entirely. Final thing I've got in here is the air slider.value. That's what's going to be needed in order to make the actual value fill up in the bar over here. I've then put some other things in here which will trigger a master alarm if the current air level is ever equal to or less than 15, and we'll then switch it off again if it goes above 15, but you don't need that. What you do need is this final curly bracket here closing off void update, and this final curly bracket here closing off the whole script. So that takes care of using sliders to create things like health or air bars. What I need to do now is show you how to make that bar go up. So if I take a quick look at my gas bottle over here in the scene, you'll see that my gas bottle has got two colliders on it. It's got a capsule collider to make it solid, just framing on that there. It's got this capsule collider around it to make it solid, but then it's also got this sphere collider, which is this green one here. And I've made that collider slightly bigger than the object by dragging it like that, so that when the player is inside it, it will know to activate and do whatever it is I'm telling it to do. And then the final thing is to make sure that that collider is set to trigger there like that. I've put a sound effect on there because I want it to play a sound. I've turned it into an audio source, and I've just done that by dragging audio, whatever the source is, audio directly onto the object in the hierarchy, not in the inspector. And then I've dechecked play on awake at the start. The final thing I've got in here, if I just move this up slightly, the final thing I've got in here is a script which has an audio clip on it, gas refill here, so that it plays this sound effect. You don't have to set it up so that it plays a sound effect, but it can often be helpful if you do, because then the player knows that they've picked something up. So if we take a look at the refill air script, which is what makes this pickup work, scroll down here, you'll notice the only variables I've got are the sound variables, and if you don't want sound, then you don't need those. At the start of the game in void awake, I'm getting that audio source. And again, if you don't want audio, then you don't need that part. Then we're moving down to on trigger enter. And you can see I've used an I enumerator. And the reason I've used an I enumerator is because I want to make it wait. I want to make it pause for a certain amount of time before doing something else. And again, if you don't want sound, you won't need this. You could just use void on trigger enter. I've got a collider other, and the collider, the other game object with a collider is going to be tagged player. So I need to make sure that my FPS controller is tagged player. Up here at the top, often starts off untagged, tagged player. So what I'm then doing is I'm going to the control air script, the one I've got here that does the slider. And you'll remember I made this static float current air level. I made it static so it could be accessed by other scripts. Which script? This script. This script is going to add to the current air level variable inside the control air script. It's going to add 25. So for every gas bottle I collect, I get 25 more air. Underneath that, I've got a system that I've developed that allows me to play an audio clip, wait for a few seconds, and then destroy that game object. The reason I do it this way is that if I try to play an audio clip inside the same method as destroying the game object, it will do both at the same time, and the audio won't play because the game object will be destroyed. What this does, this line here, shoots it 20 meters straight through the floor and then plays the audio. This audio down here. It will then wait for 4 seconds. What it then does is it mutes the audio source, so if it's still playing it switches it off, and then finally it destroys the game object. This allows the audio to play for 4 seconds. Why 4 seconds? Because that's the duration of the audio clip. It allows it to play for 4 seconds and then destroys the game object so it doesn't clutter up the scene, but by shooting it 20 meters through the floor straight away, it gives the illusion that it's been collected immediately and it's disappeared from the game environment straight away. Like that. Finally down here I've got this play audio function that I've created that simply says on the audio source, which audio source? This one here, the same one that's on the clip. Play one shot, which means play once. What's it playing? It's playing the clip. Which clip? The clip that I've dragged into here, and it's playing it at 70% volume. This control health script is exactly the same as the control air script, except that now I'm creating variables for health, 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 instead of air, air, air. So the final thing to look at is what you need to do if you want the bar, the progress bar in this case, to appear over a game object itself and to track the player around the scene. It's actually pretty straightforward. So what we were doing before is we were going to the camera, which is the first person character in this case, and we were right clicking and we were putting a canvas directly on the player. In order for the progress bar to appear above the object, unsurprisingly, you put the canvas on the object. So this is the solar station here, and this is the canvas I've created. And again, I've just right clicked UI canvas. But there's one important difference. The default when you create a canvas is that it appears in screen space overlay. This would make it appear like a heads-up display on the corners of the screen or wherever else. Here we want it to appear in the game world itself. So we need to change this setting to world space. The next thing we do is pretty much what we've done before. We put a canvas on it with a slider that creates a background, a fill area and a fill. If you want to change the color of the progress bar, in this case green, you do so here in the fill section. And then finally, because the slider is the thing that I want to affect with a script, it's the slider that's got the script on it. In this case, it's a generate power script. All three of these objects have the same script on them, but it's possible to make all three count up at a different speed because each script has its own rate of increase variable here. Let's take a quick look at the script. So the script's got quite a few variables on it. It's got a public float for the current generation level, which you can see here. That's just to let me know where we're up to. It's got a public float for the rate of increase. This allows me to control how fast I want it to increase, or if I change the maths down here, decrease. I've got the fill image and the slider as before, and the slider is the same slider that's got the script on here. Finally, I've got this public transform target. If I want that slider to track the player around the screen so it always looks like it's in front of them, then I'm going to need this variable here. Of course, as always, when dealing with the UI, I need the unity.ui up at the top of the screen. So if we get into void awake, you can see that I'm getting the component of the slider. Which slider? The same slider that this is on. And I'm just setting the current generation level to 0. So that whatever I do down here, it's adding on top of the 0. It means it's counting up from nothing, which in the case of 3 mining or generation systems, you kind of want them to start off with nothing in them. Finally, down here in void update, it's very similar to the other scripts. I'm creating a new float for fill value, and that's going to equal whatever the current it's going to equal current generation level, and current generation level is going to equal whatever it was a moment ago, plus the rate of increase, whatever rate of increase I've created and set down here. This is how fast it will count up, so you can have one script, put it on several different objects, and they'll all count up at different rates. I'm going to multiply that times time.delta time. This might look like 2 lines, but it is in fact all 1 line. And then finally, because the slider needs to affect something inside void update, I'm going to use slider.value. It's going to be this fill value that I've created here, which is using the gen levels and the rate of increase that I've created up here. The final thing I'm going to do is add this little transform lookat. What lookat does is it means it will track whatever the target value is. So in this case, I've created target as a variable here. Target appears in here. What I've done is I've dragged the FPS controller, the player, into target. That means that wherever I move around the screen, it will always try and track me as though I was looking at it straight away. That, quite simply, is how you use sliders to create bars, how you make them count up, and in this case, how you put them on objects in the game and make them follow the player around the screen. Thank you very much for watching this tutorial.